Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. We're producing this episode for GoodCrowd.info, and our guest today is Loyd, who is the president of Urban Juncture. Bernard, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, you're doing some amazing work, and I want to get to that in a minute, but I want just to, let's talk about your amazing work, and then we'll come back to this other topic I was going to raise first, because I think that'll be better as a follow-up. But Bernard, tell us about what you're doing on the south side of Chicago.
Devin, we are working to utilize cuisine, to utilize food as a central platform for community development. Food as a key amenity for residents of this community. You know, unfortunately, this is a so-called food desert community. There's very little quality food. And as a result, so many of us get in our cars and drive away and spend our money elsewhere. So that's one key objective. But secondly, food as a destination. And in Chicago, as in many other major cities around the US, there are a number of very attractive, well-traveled ethnic dining destinations. Chinatown is the biggest, Greek town, Little Italy, Devin for Indian cuisine and so forth. And these dining destinations are the economic and social hubs of their ethnic communities. But there is no such dining destination around Black cuisine. So we are working to put together a number of culinary venues that celebrate different aspects of Black cuisine and to begin to create that sort of dining destinations, bring people in, create jobs, and create high quality food opportunities.
It's a great idea. One of the things I've worried about, though, as I've read about your work there, there's a tension, it seems, between redevelopment efforts that help a local community and those that tend to push out or in some way harm low-income residents of a community. How do you manage that tension with Urban Juncture?
Devin, that tension is very real. And the way we manage it is we work very hard to create jobs that are accessible locally. So the notion is that we need to lift the community, and we need to lift the community by providing opportunities locally. So for example, in our first restaurant, we have, it's a very small restaurant, we have 7 full-time or pretty close to full-time staff members. And all of them are members, 6 of them are members, are Southsiders, 1 of them is a Westsider. So all of them are members of this community, or in the case of the Westside, a community that is very similar to this. And by providing that sort of economic opportunity, we are increasing their and their families' ability to sustain themselves as the community lifts up.
Yeah. I think that's a really noble objective. So you've got 1 restaurant open. What's your vision? Are you going to open 2, 3, 10, 20?
So we opened our first restaurant about 8 months ago. In addition to that, we have several other enterprises that we have opened, the first beginning about 7 years ago. The first was a community garden that we opened in 2000, half a block away from the restaurant. The next was a community bicycling initiative that is about 100 feet away from the restaurant site. And just a couple of weeks ago, we opened an incubator, a business incubator in a space above the restaurant. So the first part of this effort is to create not just a restaurant or a set of restaurants, but to create that plus a set of complementary enterprises that give people different reasons to come to 51st Street and the Green Line, to come to our location and to patronize it, be they coming for food, be they coming for the garden, for bicycling, for business development. But to your question specifically, we have funding in place to launch another set of 3 restaurants that will all occupy space in the building that we own at 51st and the Green Line. So that's the near term. Long term, we absolutely see 51st Street, both our property and other properties on 51st Street, as housing a dozen, 2 dozen, and more restaurants. The potential of the cuisine is almost limitless when you think about Black cuisine worldwide.
So give me some examples of traditional Black cuisine that you envision kind of populating the neighborhood.
Absolutely. So our first restaurant, the Bronzeville Jerk Shack, celebrates delicious Jamaican road fare. So the kind of food that you would find at the street side or at the beachfront in Jamaica. It's jerk cuisine. We have a wonderful peppered shrimp. We do some jerked vegetarian items such as a tilapia, as a portobello mushroom. So that is just one slice of Caribbean cuisine that we are already celebrating on 51st Street. If you go to, say, South America, I'm a big fan of Brazil, for example. Brazil has a huge Black population, the largest Black population outside of Africa. And there are wonderful cuisines within Brazil that are based on what those folks brought from Africa that we'd love to celebrate here. Coming to the US, there are multiple cuisines in the US. Think about the wonderful cuisines of New Orleans. Think about what we traditionally call soul food, the cuisines of Mississippi, Alabama, and so forth. Think about low country cuisine. Think about the African-American slant at barbecue cuisine. There are, and those are particular food types. Layer onto that different ways of presenting that, be it fine dining, be it quick service, be it in a sports bar with African-American sports celebrities. There are so many ways to take this wonderful cultural culinary asset and assemble a set of offerings that would be unique and valuable that we've just begun to scratch the surface of.
That's great. Well, I commend you for that great work you're doing, and it sounds just delicious. Can't wait to visit in a few years when things are really up and rolling. Now, you are raising a little bit of money on WeFunder. Tell us a little bit about what you can about your effort to raise money there.
So, Devin, the background to this effort is that capital is the most scarce resource that, and of course, a very critical resource that we must secure as fuel to our efforts. Unfortunately, the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago, so the Black community in Chicago has been the victim of redlining, financial redlining, way back 40, 50 years ago by the federal government in terms of its housing policies, subsequently by banks. And while that redlining, that officially sanctioned redlining is no longer the practice, the after effects of that are still very much with us. Just one indicator of that is the huge wealth gap between the average African-American household and the average Caucasian household. And that wealth gap is, the way to think about it is that there is less than, for every dollar that is in a Caucasian household in terms of wealth, there is less than a dime in terms of the average African-American household.
Yeah.
So what that...
It's a shocking statistic and tragic. Yeah.
It's staggering. It's staggering. And when you think of the implications of that, and particularly think of the implications of that in the culinary arena, when you think about restaurant startups, how do restaurant startups generally get funded? It's friends and family. It's friends and family putting together their resources to help a friend or a family member get something started. And when you're in this situation where the resources available in the community are such a small fraction of what they would be in another community, it gives you an indication of how difficult it is to assemble the capital needed to get any startup going. So crowdfunding is a unique opportunity for us. It's a way of engaging folks who are like-minded, who are not necessarily local, but could be local, in an effort that we believe they will support. So if for folks who feel that the huge discrepancy in terms of economic opportunity in the United States, certainly in Chicago, is a problem and should be worked on, for folks who believe that is our joint responsibility, crowdfunding is a mechanism for engaging those folks and allowing them to participate.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing specifically is raising an amount of money that will support our culinary developments on the south side of Chicago.
And your goal for that capital raise is?
The near-term goal is 100,000. The overall need is significantly larger, but getting to that near-term goal will be of significant value to us. It will help us move some things forward that we could not otherwise move forward.
Sure. Well, it's really inspiring work that you're doing, and I commend you. You are really becoming a leader in your community. And as a leader, I'm wondering who you look up to as a leader. Who inspires you?
One of the people who really inspires me and has inspired me for a long time is a leader in a neighboring community. His name is Michael Howard. He's a leader in the Fuller Park community area, which lies just west of Bronzeville. He's just an amazing guy. About almost 20 years ago, and I should say the Fuller Park community area is one of the poorest areas in Chicago. The lack of opportunity that we have here is even more widespread in that community. It is located between the Dan Ryan Expressway and a set of railroad lines. And you can think of it as a bit of a forgotten community in many respects. But over a period of many years in the 1980s and 1990s, a tract of land in that community was utilized as an illegal fly dumping site by what appears to have been literally hundreds of trucks, hundreds of folks illegally dumping refuse in that area. And Michael Howard, who grew up in that community, saw this issue, took action, and over a period of nearly a decade, has really put into action all of his assets. He's a general contractor by trade. He's a tree keeper. He's a farmer. He's an environmentalist. But he brought together his community, and over years, they worked wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow, truck by truck to get that refuse out and to create from what was one of the worst sites on the south side, a beautiful nature site now called Eden Place Nature Center. That's just been a tremendous asset to his community and to the south side as a whole. So he's the person who I just admire greatly because of the passion, the commitment, the energy, the skill that he brought to that effort and what he's accomplished.
That's great. That's great. Now, you are doing some remarkable work there in Chicago. I think a lot of people recognize the need for the sort of thing that you're doing in their own communities. But most of us see that need and don't do anything. Help us understand why you felt compelled to actually do something in your community.
There's a couple of reasons that underlie that. First of all, I was born on the west side of Chicago, and I had the opportunity, through no act of my own, to leave there and to work and to study in some amazing places as a young man. I spent 10 years at MIT. I left there and I went to McKinsey & Company, a leading consulting firm. And that opportunity while I worked hard, the fact that I had those opportunities was largely due to things outside of my control. I was lucky. You know, my family was able to provide that, at least get the start of that. And the reality is that today, those opportunities are not available to many of what would have been my peers back in those days. So I feel very lucky, and I feel a responsibility to help create some of that luck for folks who are in a similar situation now as I was many years ago. I'd say the second thing is I live here. I live in this community. I moved back to the South Side, which is very similar to the West Side where I grew up, 20 years ago. And so every day I walk these streets and I see the issues. And there's young men on the streets who have very few opportunities, who are trying to make ends meet. And one of my colleagues told me recently that when she didn't see a young man, the question was either he had been shot and was in the hospital, or he had found a job, or he was in jail. And so that's the very real situation for too many young males in this community. And I feel that we all have a responsibility for doing something about it.
Well, it's impressive that you feel that collective responsibility and yet don't dismiss your role in that, and work actively for it. So I congratulate you for that. Now, we like to ask all of our guests for an impact hack, some tip that would help us to do more good, and you're doing a lot of good. What's your impact hack?
So I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the most important problem is that we are facing, and trying to take that problem apart, look at it from different directions, and trying to find the best solution to that problem. Now, and I utilize it just a variety of different approaches to try to make progress on that. I start just working by myself, just thinking through the problem, trying to see if it can be disaggregated into logical pieces. I turn the problem over, I'll look at it from different angles to see if there's a better way of looking at it, a more productive way. I'll reach out to my colleagues and my friends to get their point of view, or my kids even. You know, is there a different point of view that I'm missing? And generally, the problems that we deal with are complex. There are multiple ways of looking at them. There are multiple ways of trying to solve them. But I keep that in front of me, and I may keep something in front of me for weeks until it feels like we've come to a solution that is as good as it's going to get. And then we try it. So just, I would say for me, it is really focusing on a problem, engaging folks that care about this problem to help me with it, and not stopping until it feels like we've come to a place where we've got a very good shot at a solution.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, Bernard, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Before you go, can you just tell us how people can learn more about Urban Juncture, how they can learn more about the crowdfunding campaign, how they can connect with you personally?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of information online. A good place to start would be the Urban Juncture website, www.urbanjuncture.com. And there's Facebook and other social media sites around that. Our WeFunder page is on wefunder.com /urban-juncture. There's a lot of information about the campaign that is available online at WeFunder, and we welcome. And I can personally be reached. There's an email on our website, and of course, I'm available on 51st Street at our Bronzeville Jerk Shack just about every day, and at our other enterprises at 51st and the Green Line on the south side of Chicago.
Fantastic. Well, Bernard, again, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and wish you every success in your efforts to re-energize your community on the west side or the south side of Chicago.
Thank you very much, Devin. It's been a pleasure.
All righty, let's do some good.